Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is an interview at the Best Western Motel, Delaware Avenue, Buffalo, New York. It is the 22nd of February, 2006, approximately 2:30 p.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Robert Joseph Choboy, date of birth 6/20/31, born here in Buffalo.
Okay, what was your educational background prior to entering service?
High school. I didn't go to college at the time. I was going to, but I didn't. That was primarily it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
Why did you decide to enlist?
Because we were at war at the time, and it's what a lot of people in my where I live, they were joining too, so I decided to join. I was approximately 19 years old at the time.
Okay, why did you select the Army?
For no reason. I just, thought that I would want to go there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Where did you go? When did you go into service?
I went into service in February of 1951, and I went immediately to Fort Dix for indoctrination and stuff like that. Okay.
That was where your basic training was held, or where did you
Okay, if I can continue, I went
Sure.
to Fort Dix for indoctrination, and then I went to Camp Chaffee, Arkansas.
Okay.
And at that point, I was trained as of course, a basic training, and then I went and trained on the 105 howitzers. And I was going to continue to do that. I expected to go to Korea and, using the 105 howitzers with the rest of the troops, but as I went along, we graduated from basic training there, if you want me to continue that.
Yes, sure.
And then we went through San Francisco, and we went to Japan, and at that point, they brought me out and says, you're not going to Korea at this time. And I went to the Itajima Specialist School. And that was in southern Japan. It was actually where the naval people, the Japanese naval people, were trained as they joined the Navy. But in any event, I sat down for 5 weeks and learned all about Morse code. I thought I never in my life would, understand that, but I certainly did after a while. And I was trained as a radio operator, a high-speed radio operator. And then after that, I went to Korea, and I went to the 51st Signal Battalion. And there we were in groups of 3, going close to the front line, but not on it, of course, backed up and receiving different reports from the line, and then go ahead and send them back to I-Corps headquarters. We did bomb runs. The jets would go out there and bomb things, and then we'd get the report from them, and of course send it back to I-Corps headquarters. And we were in groups of 3s, and that's all we did. We lived in a tent. We had the radio equipment there, and it was very scary, if I can say it, because the North Koreans are all over these mountains looking for people like us. And as a matter of fact, one of them got killed. So, being 19 years old, and we'd lock the doors and keep the weapons there to make sure nothing's going to happen to us. And I did that for a long time.
Was it strictly Morse code you were working with at that
We were,
point?
as a matter of fact, after we did Morse code, we went in a radio teletype. And this was mostly on teletype. The Morse code itself we used, but not that much because they were bringing that new Teletype in. So we used that quite a bit. And I actually spent 3 winters in Korea. And at being 19 again, it was an awful long time. I don't have to tell you how bad the winters in Korea were. They were horrible. And at one point, I should say, my brother-in-law, Eric Putnam, he was up there in Shorewan, which is 20 miles away from where I was. And he was using the 105 howitzers. And at one point, we happened to get together. I can't remember how it happened or anything like that, but he came down and I met him for maybe 2 hours. And it was just so great to see somebody from the family, you know, in a place like that, just spending 2 hours. I'll never forget it. Eric, he was up there on a 105 howitzers, and he firing these things. They had earplugs probably. I don't know what they had, but after firing them for a long time, 1.5 years or something like that, Eric right now is almost deaf. He can't hear because of the I always blamed it on the howitzers. I had to, but it's very sad now because I was just with him yesterday and he's got earplugs, getting everything from the VA, and thank God for the VA because he's getting all this great stuff, but he is actually deaf. And if you want me to continue, of course.
Yes.
Let me just ask you something.
Yes.
With the cold there, did you have many problems with that new machinery, the Teletype machines breaking down or seizing up or anything?
No.
They worked fine?
No. The problem we had there was the inexperience because it was just coming out, and some of the equipment we didn't know how to use, like setting it up and stuff like that. And we had to be trained, from people like that. The transition there from Morse code to radio teletype, it wasn't a continuous thing. It just didn't all of a sudden go into radio teletype. It was a transition, and we finally did learn it. I was not real good at the time with that. I wasn't that well versed with radio teletype, but now, as I remember it, it was good. It was better because Morse code is very difficult, and I'll tell you why. Because right around 6 o'clock, or no, 5 o'clock at night, you get an awful lot of interference, what we call QRM, which is, and you can hardly hear doing it real fast. It's very difficult to copy. That's why radio teletype was so much easier, because you would get it right off the typewriter, and that was a huge thing, really, because it was very difficult, as I said before, to use Morse code late at night.
How about your winter gear? Did you have good winter gear where you were warm, or did you?
That's a good question. We did have good mountain sleeping bags. We had the overcoats and stuff like that, and no matter what happened, it was still cold. There's no question like that. One of the funniest things, of course, the 3 of us are in a tent, and there is 6 people in a tent, in that small tent, and we have the fire going, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, the fire would go out, and now it's your turn to light that fire. And when you wake up, the whole inside of the tent is all frost. Absolutely, like you're in a refrigerator. It's really funny. I'll never forget that either. That was something.
Now, what kind of weapons did you carry?
We carried the 45s and the carbines. That's what we had.
Did you ever have any trouble with your weapons getting seized up with the cold, or?
No.
Okay.
Like I said, I really wasn't that involved in combat or stuff like that. We had to have the weapons, they were there, but that's about it.
But even you were pretty well forward, right?
Yeah?
And the Koreans never fell
Well,
upon you or anything, did they?
One of them, the truck itself was broken into, and the operators were killed. And that bothered me for a long, long time. You know, it had to. It was terrible because you're always looking towards the door. And, you know, people get killed like that. And we always had problems with the, what would you call them? These people that go up on the poles, the telephone poles, to string wire and stuff like that. They were always getting killed. Now, as I continue, can you stop that for a minute?
Sure. Okay. After your tour was over?
After my tour was over, right, in Korea, I returned to the U.S.
Can I stop you for 1 second and
Yes,
ask you
absolutely.
about something you wrote down here? You said that you had an unusual duty working with Army engineers, checking depths of a river or something?
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you said
Yeah,
that.
You mentioned that here.
Yes, exactly. The Imjum River. And that was strange because we'd have to go. We worried about the bridges going, across that river up to the front, and we had to check the depth of the river every hour on the hour to see how high it was. And it was supposed to go to a certain point, and then they'd take all the bridges back. And we did that. I did that for probably a month and a half, 2 months, and finally. When we got to the rainy season, the monsoons came so fast that the bridges were wiped out anyway, no matter what we did.
Now, how did you get assigned to this engineering unit?
When the 51st Signal Battalion, we, as groups of threes, we would go with the 1st Marine Division, the K-MAG, which is the South Korean division, for a month, and then we would go to the Turks. We weren't always assigned. We were assigned to different people. I mean, different nationalities. That's what that was all about. Right.
Now, what was it like, for example, being assigned to a South Korean unit or a Turk unit or so on? Did you have much interrelationships with the people themselves, the soldiers themselves from these countries?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
And I'm sure that everybody was South Korean. We would know how to say hello, how are you, and stuff like that. And that's funny because a lady and her son taught me a Korean song, and I've been singing that song forever. You want me to sing it for you?
Sure.
Aridong, aridong, arariyo, aridong kogero no maganda, naru podigo kashinani mum, shimni do mukasu pao pyongyangda. I haven't done it in a long time.
Do you know what it means?
It's a song about Korean children. I often tried to find out what it means, but I remember that song for 55 years. Absolutely.
Now, what was your food like at the front lines? Were you, do you have rations? Or?
Great questions, because we ate with the Marines, or we ate with these different Australians and stuff like that. So we used their food and drink their beer, actually. And of course, we all know that's what makes the United States Army go around, is the good beer. And I'll never forget that if you look at I suppose your bunk is here, and it's a description of how your bunk should be, and right in that corner it says XXX, which means that's where you put your beer. And that was always funny to me, because the Army would never tell you that you should drink beer or anything like that. That's funny.
Okay, now I noticed you received the Bronze Star. Do you have the story behind that, or?
Not really. No. I don't. No.
Okay.
No. There was.
All right. Let's see. I don't know. Are there any other
Yes.
things you wanted to mention?
Absolutely. I came back from Korea and I went to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. And there, by then I was a field first sergeant. And I taught the people coming in, being in the Signal Corps, the radios and what we were doing on the front lines and stuff like that. They became radio operators. And one thing I should say, that being in Korea for 3 years there and in Seoul and stuff like that, when I came back, and now this is a long time afterwards, I became the sales manager for a tool and die firm. And after 55 years, I was able to go back to Korea and I worked for the Hyundai car company, Hyundai car company. We were making Sealand trailers for them, working with presses, you know, punching out holes and stuff like that. And I was actually able to go back there and see the throughways that they have and all the transportation and it was, you know, a very modern country compared to what it was way back in, you know, in Seoul.
Were the people there aware that you were a veteran?
Yes.
How were you treated?
Good, great. We had our representative there, Mr. Kim, who was a very nice man, and his wife and children, and so glad that they had, you know, great accommodations at this time. Absolutely, that was really good.
Did you ever get to see any USO shows while you were over?
Yes. Mickey Rooney. He was there and he was funny. And I walked him back to the Jeep and I took my arm and put it right over the top of his head. That was funny. I said, could I do that? You know, and he was a real shrimp. Absolutely.
Did you see anybody else there besides him?
Oh, good grief. No. I'm sure I did, but I don't remember that. Now, I want to say a little bit about Robin Schimminger. He's the assemblyman there in Tonawanda where I live, and he actually got all the veterans together on a Saturday morning, had them all over to this brand new high school, and there was a lot of us, an awful lot of us. He had all the families there, and I don't think the families realized how important that was to the veterans, because there they were, and he said a lot of great words and stuff like that. He also went ahead and had a monument built in Veterans Park. You know, just like in Washington where you have your name inscripted on it. I thought that was super. Really.
Now, what special award did you receive that day? I know each of you received the state medal, didn't you?
I got the whole thing down in my basement listed, the citations that we had from the Korean governments and stuff like that, and from Robin Schimminger. That was great. That was really good.
Okay. How did you ever make use of the GI Bill after you got out?
The GI Bill, as far as education is concerned?
Or buying a home or anything? Did you use it in any way?
If it was available to me, absolutely I did. And I think, and I've got to say this, is so important, that hospital that we have right here in Buffalo, the VA hospital on Bailey Avenue. I've been there. I go there all the time. I think it's the best thing that could happen to us. I went there for therapy and stuff like that, and anything you want, anything, just anything. You know, I was doing the therapy, and he says, you got to ride your bicycle, and I says, I don't have one. He says, I'll get you one, and it's a training, it's a bicycle, attaches to this table and stuff like that. It was really nice. Also, and this is so important, as I sat there in therapy, I seen these veterans from World War II and Korea and Vietnam, and they can hardly walk. They got nurses holding them and on these guides, and that's all they do is back and forth, and they're never going home, and it'd make you cry. It really would. It's terrible.
Do you join any veterans organizations?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the American Legion that I belong to, I get the guys, and we're going Friday again, and we play euchre there every second. Every 2 weeks we play euchre. 8 people, have a lot of fun. Great organization, and there's a good possibility that all of a sudden that they're going to, not have. They'll be obsolete, and that would be terrible. Absolutely. How close are we here?
Oh, close. Did you, lost my question.
Okay.
Did you stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
Not really. I started, like we all do, start a couple letters and stuff like that, and it dwindles after a while. No.
Okay.
No.
How do you think your time in the service changed or had an effect on your life?
Greatly. Greatly.
In what ways?
Because I was out of Buffalo. I was into the world. I was in Fort Dix. I was down there in Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. Stop right there, because in Camp Chaffee, Arkansas, we were on the firing line, firing those 105 howitzers, and then it was the weekend, and I came into a town there, and we were walking around having some beers and stuff like that, and there was a woman that asked me a question, and I says, he was an actor. It was Sunday afternoon, and he was an actor, and he was going to do Audie Murphy, Yank in Korea. And I happened to recognize the guy, and I got all excited, and I went with this actor, and we took pictures and all this stuff. And
do you know who it was?
I
you remember?
Oh man, I was trying for the last couple of days to remember that name. It was a Yank in Korea. And he asked me, he says, where do you live? I says, New York. And he says, I'm going up there. Do you want to ride on my airplane? That was really fun. And they actually come out there on the firing line looking for me.
Huh.
That was really great. Absolutely.
Are there any other ways that it maybe affected your life, your time in the service?
Yeah, affected my life. Sure, I would say every young man should go in and do some time in the service. Strictly, one thing for discipline. I mean, all of a sudden, these little boys that have their, attached to their mother and stuff like that, and they get away, and all of a sudden they're crying and stuff. The Army makes a man out of you. There is no question. You get out there, and we have only us to depend on. The 3 of us. We're away from home, and it does make a man out of you. To repeat, it's great.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your interview.
Are we all done? Oh my
Unless
God!
you'd like to add something else, if you can think of anything.
Oh.
Well, I know some of the things you wrote down here is just thinking of something else. You said something about New Year's Day in 1953 in Korea, how that was a memorable event.
I'll be damned. Yeah, Jesus.
Why was that so memorable?
And we had our party, and it's New Year's, and we're having the pop and the beer and stuff like that. And the mess sergeant was there, and he handles all the candy, all the chocolates and stuff like that. And he's into the sauce pretty good. And I says, can I have some of them chocolate bars? And he loaded me up like this, and I had this much, and I'm walking towards, back to the tent, and I'm walking, And at that point, they fired every gun on that we had on the line at 12 o'clock. Every weapon that we had was fired. And I thought they're coming to get it. I threw all that chocolate up in the air, and I ran like hell. I thought we were being under attack. That was funny. Really.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much.
I'll be
That's it.
darned.